the worst that happens to me is somebody says no. And that is not the worst thing that will happen to me in my life. And so I can put this in perspective, realize that it's not a judgment on my worth as a human being, and sort of continue to take these risks. And that's partly what I mean by learning to walk with doubt, because we don't banish it, but we can negotiate with it and what it does to us and how it lives in us, and does not have to be the only voice that we listen to.
Welcome to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Fraser, a formerly repressed creative soul turned fiction writer, story editor, and author accelerator certified fiction book coach. At Write It Scared, we tell the truth about why writing a novel is so hard by acknowledging that most writers grapple with two stories: the one they want to put on the page to the best of their ability, and the often subconscious internal story that prevents them from doing it. This show is designed to help you identify and rewrite the internal narrative holding you back while you discover and write the story you want to tell, and learn all the tools to help you do that successfully. Join me each week for a new episode where we'll talk about writing to deepen our understanding of the craft and of ourselves as writers. Writing a novel is an inside job that we do not do alone. Welcome to Write It Scared. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hi, writer. Welcome back to the Write It Scared podcast. I'm your host, Stacey, and today I have such a fantastic conversation to share with you about self-doubt and how to learn to dance with it. And if you're a regular listener, you know that a huge part of this podcast is helping writers learn how to navigate the doubting internal stories that hold them back from writing the things that call to their hearts. So I had the pleasure of talking with Amy Bernstein, and I have to say this was my all-time favorite conversation on the podcast. Amy and I speak very much the same language, and she wrote this amazing book called Wrangling the Doubt Monster, Fighting Fears and Finding Inspiration. I absolutely loved it. And I would say, please do yourself a favor and go purchase this book for yourself, for your friends. It is just one of those things that you want to keep beside you, hold close to your heart, because it will feed you in times of frustration, in times of worry, in times of doubt. So here's Amy's bio, and then we will jump into our interview. Amy L. Bernstein is the author of Wrangling the Doubt Monster, Fighting Fears, Finding Inspiration, which is an inspirational book for all self-doubting creatives. She is an award-winning novelist, a former journalist, and a certified nonfiction book coach, helping authors find their best path to publishing. Amy teaches writing and creativity workshops for writers and other creatives, and brings an empowering message to writers and multimedia artists around the world. Amy, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I am so thrilled to talk to you about your book. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you so much for having me on, Stacey.
Yeah, so a keystone of this podcast is dedicated to helping writers overcome the variations of self-doubt that they experience. And so I was ecstatic to see your book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster, hit the shelves. And I remember learning about it. It was last fall. And I know it's been in the works for a long time, but I learned about it last fall. I think you and I were teaching at a summit together. And I immediately pre-ordered when I could. So we are going to talk about that today. But before we dive into your book, why don't you share, if you would, a bit more about your journey to becoming a writer and a writing mentor with our listeners?
Absolutely. My writing journey is really, really all tied up like strands of sort of twisted DNA in my doubt journey. And it's taken me a while to realize how this is all of a piece. Because, I've really only always been a writer in one sort or another. For decades, all my jobs have had writing at the heart of them. I think I wrote my first short story in second grade. And, I was an English major in college. I did a lot of writing. I loved it. I was the kind of person who actually liked doing term papers because it was a great writing exercise. So I've always been a writer, and I went on to do that professionally and worked in DC in government many years, again, mostly writing. Then I was a journalist and I was an executive speechwriter. And yet I would not call myself a writer until well into my late middle years. I couldn't do it. because somehow that was somebody else, somebody better than I was, somebody more special than I was a writer. I was just this person who happened to write. So the journey is all tied up there. I'm a lifelong doubter and a lifelong writer who couldn't call herself a writer.
I love that. And it resonates hard. I get it. I totally understand the message of I write, but I'm no, I'm not a writer. Even published authors, have a struggle sometimes to own that term. So this is kind of par for the course, one doubter to another. Mine was a little different. Like, I didn't start writing till much later in life. And I think that it was doubts that held me back from just believing that I even could belong in the creative space at all. So it shows up in all variations. Well, thank you for sharing that. And then, so you've written this book, but what else do you do? I know that you do more things than just write fiction or non-fiction.
And sit around doubting. I do more things than sit around doubting. Yes. So I do write fiction and now this nonfiction, and I do write weekly on Substack. I'm also a certified book coach, and I do have a professional book coaching practice, and I'm specializing in helping authors in nonfiction and some authors in memoir, mostly other forms of nonfiction, to find their own best path to publishing. So I'm an accountability partner, and I help writers, both published and not yet published, to really shape a nonfiction book so that it has an undeniable power and is ready to find its place, out in the marketplace. That is extremely rewarding work. And alongside that, I also teach quite a bit online and in person. I do a lot of writing workshops and creativity workshops on all aspects of craft, and as well as, helping us feel that we can claim our identities as creative people. So it's all in the mix there. So keeps me pretty busy.
Yeah. And I'm so grateful that you're in the world and that you do the work that you do. So tell us about your book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster. What's it about? Who's it for?
Wrangling the Doubt Monster is that little book for every self-doubting creative at every age, at every stage, and really in any profession. And it's not a how-to book. It's not a guidebook. It's not really a workbook. It's a book that is meant to inspire and encourage people who have such strong doubts that it's holding them back from doing things they really deeply want to do. And so this is the kind of book where you can open to almost any page and feel very seen as a person struggling with doubt, but also feel encouraged to really kind of walk with doubt and go forward despite it, which is some of what I hint at in the book. So it really is inspiration and encouragement. It's illustrated, which kind of brings a warm and lighthearted feeling to the book. And I tell readers, you know what? Buy this, keep it next to your laptop, keep it on your nightstand. Just open it up when you're kind of feeling low or stuck or unsure, and you'll find a page that will get you moving again.
Yeah, it is all of that to me and more. There is a compassion. Here's my copy, Amy. It is just tabbed and all the thing.
That's amazing. Got tabs all through the book. I love that. I absolutely
love this. And there is a compassionate truth bomb on every page. And not only is it inspiring, but to me, it does make me feel seen. And I think that'll be everyone's experience who reads this, because I have never met a person who didn't struggle with doubt. If they say they don't, I don't trust them.
No, everyone does doubt. I think we're not always in touch with it, and we don't always name it for what it is. It comes out in other ways. Yes.
Yeah, 100%. So one of my favorite lines, if it's okay, I'd love to read a line from your book, because it's absolutely...
Be my guest. I'm only going to charge you a certain amount for that, but go right ahead.
Well, it's on page 25, and it says, every single act of creating is also an act of doubting. And I think that's so incredibly profound and true, and it makes it okay for me. And I hope for a lot of other people that read it, makes it okay. That you're not doing anything wrong because you have these doubts. They're part of the creative process. So, what inspired you to write this?
I think that something had to have been welling up in me for a really long time. And I think that, I had stepped into my own writing life within just a couple of years and really starting to put this on paper. And I was experiencing a lot of rejection and having so much doubt about my ability to write and to write novels and do all the things. And I was really struggling with it. And I, it was almost an unconscious process at the beginning in the sense of, oh, I'm going to write this book about doubt. And it's going to look like this, it's going to look like that. It just wasn't even that intentional. It became intentional because it had to. I just started really honestly pouring my heart out on the page. And then obviously doing it in as structured a way as I could. But it came out almost like prose poetry because as readers will see, the lines on the page, the text is almost laid out like poetry, shorter lines, 2 lines at a time, lots of white space. It's not poetry per se, but it's stepping toward that kind of a structure and kind of a feel as well when you read it. And once I started these well springs of dealing with this issue, what does doubt feel like? How does it manifest itself? How does it make me feel? How does it make other people feel? I mean, I just put myself in this place of deep, let's call it radical empathy about what this feels like. And I just knew that if I was feeling that way, other people had to be feeling that way. I felt that way really my whole life, and I couldn't be the only one. And I'm so glad I brought it out there because you're proof. I mean, you and many other people, like, yes, we're all swimming in the same pond here. We can all throw each other a lifeline.
Yeah. And one of the things that you say in the book is doubt is often something you have or you tell yourself. It's a story that you tell yourself, but you often do it in secret. And from many, many hard lessons learned over my life, I have learned that keeping things a secret is not a road to happiness. Keeping things like pretending that I'm fine when I'm not. When my outsides don't match my insides, that doesn't really serve me. And it doesn't serve anybody else around me. I really think that by sharing what you said, radical empathy, and I think the road to radical empathy is radical vulnerability. But we have to create safe containers to be able to move that way. And that's one beautiful thing about book coaching is it creates that safe container for people to be truly vulnerable, and then they can come to an understanding of their doubts, develop empathy, and from that you move forward and can create real and true lasting change.
You put that so beautifully. You're absolutely right. I agree completely with the way you express that. And I think we have to acknowledge that one of the reasons we keep secrets about, for example, our doubts is because we live in a culture where it's still very difficult sometimes to show our vulnerability. And there's a sense of shame that goes along with feeling uncertain and uncertain about ourselves and our worth and, our abilities and all of these things. There's a sense of shame about that because we're in a culture that shows us certainty and success in very sort of hard-edged ways. And that we're not that on the inside, we're just this puddle, right? And so I think too, there's such a fascinating gender component here because while women, of course, also struggle with these feelings of not wanting to vocalize these feelings sometimes, we are somewhat more willing to do so than many men have, who I think still have, it's not that they're not feeling it, it's just they have even bigger barriers up against expressing it. And so I think, one of my challenges is I really would like this book to reach more men and have these conversations with more men around doubt and the vulnerability that brings forward. Because I think they need it. I think they kind of owe it to themselves, instead of because they'll still cope quietly and in silence. And I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree. I love Brene Brown, which is where I learned a lot about just cultivating empathy and compassion for myself and being vulnerable and what that meant. One book that particularly inspired me was The Gifts of Imperfection. And I saw myself in that book so hard. But I remember her doing a talk about it. And there was a man in the audience who came up to her and said, "This is all great and fine, but what about me? It doesn't really apply to my lens." And she's like, "I'm sorry, I don't research men." And he's like, "Well, that's a problem." She goes, "Oh, you know what? You're right."
Anyway, I just agree that sometimes they get left out of the equation, as do non-binary, as do others, you know?
Mhm.
So, okay. Well, could you touch on how your book redefines doubt as something that a creative hopes to avoid and instead indicates one is more or less on the right track in their creative pursuits?
So I think you're asking, what is the upside of doubt? Is
Yeah, what's
that
the upshot?
right? Right. The upside. Yeah. So doubt has the power to protect us, just as it has the power to derail us and hold us back. And it has the power to protect us by asking us to take a pause, take a moment, kind of look around and say, am I doing this in the way that will serve me best or serve others best? Am I doing this, whatever, this can be anything. Am I doing this for the right reasons, meaning the reasons that connect with my own passion and purpose? Am I missing something that would enable me to step into this work with greater joy and intention and, toward whatever outcome I want? So doubt can be a very healthy form of pause. And, a great analogy is, before a surgeon, cuts into a patient with the knife, they may well consult another physician, consult a chart, take a breath, look at a record again, look at something, look at an x-ray, who knows, right? Point being that they're taking that pause to make sure, am I proceeding in the best way and in the right way that's going to, do no harm and be beneficial. So doubt has the power to protect us. And there are things that we should say no to because they're in fact going to hurt us and not help us. And sometimes we can be doubtful about those things because this is that gut check, right? It all ties together. And your gut is saying, I don't know. I don't know about this one. And you have to really, really listen deeply and honestly and figure out whether is that the good doubt or the nasty doubt, right? And it gets into really knowing yourself. And let me just say that this ties into one other thing that's so important, and it's all of a piece really, and that is, if you give yourself permission to try, you give yourself permission to take chances, you give yourself permission to try or start something new, something you haven't done before, then you're going to be able to walk with your doubt and go forward because you are giving yourself permission to feel that sense of discomfort and yet step into the excitement. But once in a while, there's something on offer or something that we might be asked to do. Let's take an example. Suppose you're not an experienced public speaker and that very next day someone invites you to do a TED talk or TEDx talk or something. Well, you're not quite ready. You're not, I mean, you may say, wow, that's great, but if you need me to do this tomorrow, I'm not there. I'm not ready to do this. This isn't where I am yet, kind of in my own journey. So I'm going to say no now, and I'm going to come back to this. And that might be the absolute right best decision for you because you're not ready to speak for 10 or 15 minutes without notes in an incredibly compelling, truthful, authentic way. That's not who you are in that moment. So you say, no, that's good. There's doubt working for you. Suppose you've been prepping and prepping and prepping and, you've been doing this kind of work and someone gives you that opportunity and you still say no. Really, really need to ask yourself, did you just deny yourself permission to do something you were truly ready to do? So we have to interrogate ourselves deeply to figure these things out. That was a long answer.
No, I totally get it. And it makes sense. And it reminds me so much of, the 2 types of fear that Tara Moore talks about. Have you read her book?
I have not.
Playing
I have
Big.
not.
I think you'd like it. I think you'd like it. But she talks about 2 types of fear, and one is a contraction type of fear, and one is a fear of expansion.
Right.
And so it's becoming kind of self-aware enough to know, am I shrinking away from an opportunity that I really want because I'm afraid of it?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this just not really the right thing for me?
Right.
And it's not, it's testing my boundaries in a way that's bringing up a red flag for me, maybe. So all of that to say that we're going to have doubts, right? Mm. We're hardwired to have them. It's part of a protective mechanism within us. So
better to learn to work with them than pretend like they don't exist. That is one of the big messages that I got out of your book. So in that vein of working with doubt, how can you use it? I really like what one of the analogies you had in the book. It's that the knife of doubt is rubber. And I liked that, in certain instances. So thinking of that it doesn't always mean no. It doesn't always mean you should not. How can you learn to dance with it and use it to your advantage?
I think that it has to do in part with how you navigate and negotiate your way around creative risk. So we have to learn how to take healthy risks. And so for me, that means I will never bungee jump off a bridge. That's for me, that is not a healthy risk. This is not going to be my thing. But a healthy risk for me is submitting a novel for publication and being willing to accept the rejection, because the healthy side of that risk is that I am putting my work out there and I'm ready for the world to try and, meet me on terms. And so we have to be able to both negotiate and sometimes renegotiate our relationship to risk, in the sense of being ready to get a no from the world or from the universe, being ready to take rejection in and still go forward. And we have to be willing to take those chances and tell ourselves in advance, I am willing to take these chances.
I love how your book says that there's many stories inside of you. Doubt is just one of them.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan.
Quoting me, it's great.
Oh, I know. Well, I mean, literally, I'm a huge fan of this book.
I really appreciate
my heart. And I always love, the saying that our feelings are not necessarily factual. They deserve to be understood and they give us information. But, making a decision without regard to what's really underneath those feelings, is in the best service usually to me. Not to say you shouldn't trust your gut, but it's that pausing before you make the first cut. Okay. And so when you were talking about how to navigate doubt and how to think about utilizing it, one of the tools in your book is the yes and.
Mm-hmm.
Could you talk about that a little bit? Because I thought that was very powerful.
I think it's coming out of what we're talking about, which is giving yourself permission to put yourself out in the world in ways you have not done before. And whatever comes back to you, you work with it. You may get a no, you may get something discouraging, you may get absolute silence, which happens to a lot of us these days. And that doesn't mean that you're being turned down or refuted in any definitive way. This is all fluid. So you can almost start to look at everything, if you want to, as kind of a yes and, in the sense of, well, I explored an avenue that did not work out for me, but there's another avenue over here that might be a better fit anyway. I'm going to go in this direction. In writing, so often, a lot of the rejection that we get is because we're not the right match. Our material, our voice, our sensibility, our format, our genre is not the right match for the thing we think we want. And so you get a no and you take it personally. And actually, that's not what the universe is telling you. The universe is telling you, you haven't found the right fit yet. This isn't your fit. And so it's always this ongoing exploration, and there's always a yes waiting for you out there. So I mean, that's part of what that's about, which maybe is a very roundabout kind of response, but this is all mindset. It's all how we think about ourselves and how we think about ourselves as actors in the world, and how we, as we can only control our responses, we can't control what happens. So I think there's a lot of that has to go on in our heads to sort of to keep going and keep creating and keep putting things out there and not feel defeated.
Yeah, well, 100%. And what I loved about the yes and, yeah, I'm writing a young adult suspense novel and I've never done that before and I can't see the damn climax and I don't know how this thing is going to end. Yes, and I'm going to do it anyway.
Exactly. I'm going to do it anyway. That is such a big, that's right. And all of a piece, and you send out your short story and it's turned down by 4 people. and you send it out again because I'm going to do it anyway because I believe in this work. And I mean, that happened to me fairly recently, like 3 no's on a short story. And then the fourth one's like, we love this. We're publishing it. Well, what? I mean, I didn't change. I didn't change. Here, this is so important. You didn't change in that time, right? You were rejected, rejected, rejected. Oh, well, I'm a bad writer. I can't do this. The fourth person alone says, we love it. You're like, oh, I guess I'm a good writer. No, you were the same all the way through. It's that the universe came to you with these different messages, and you just have to take those in, be you, still be you, believe in yourself, be true to yourself, do your best work, and, keep looking for the right fit. And it's just so easy to get discouraged and stop. Believe me, I've been on that precipice so many times. But yes, this is part of the yes and. It's like you could almost convince yourself that everything out there is a yes and for you. It's not a no.
I love that. And I also love how you touch on, like, it's, what do you say? Remission is possible, recurrence is definite, or something. It's something like that.
Right.
When it comes to
Right.
doubt, it's never,
Right.
you're never going to not have it. I believe I will never not deal with doubt. I will. And there's a piece of that that's healthy. That means that I'm not a complete narcissist.
Right. Right.
That means that, that I have a system of checks and balances, and that I'm just a human. I'm just a human being, and I am not a robot. And that's a good thing.
So exactly. And I always do say we cannot banish doubt. I mean, I think these feel good headlines like how to overcome all your doubts and get self-confident. It's just overstating things. You're not going to overcome these things, but we are going to cope with them, and we can cope with them better than we have in the past by really, really kind of listening to these voices. And one of the things I like to remind people is you can change the channel in your head. So the negative voices will win out if you let them, because they're very loud and very insistent. I mean, the villain is always the most fun character in the piece, right? And so, I mean, Cruella de Vil is like the best thing, that there is in 101 Dalmatians, right? So, and Maleficent is the best thing in Snow White. I mean, the villains are great, right? So you've got villains living in your head, but they are not the only voices. You have hero voices too, that come from your past and what you've done and what you've accomplished and how you've grown and how you've changed and what you've overcome. And so we need to listen to those voices and just dial down the other ones. They don't go away, but it's not the only voice that we should be listening to.
Yeah. And when you have those moments when I call it the shitty committee, but the voices of the villains, the committee of villains, the shitty committee.
I love that.
When those voices are running through your mind, having a tool like your book is something that you can reach for to remind yourself of what is true, not just how you're feeling. So let's transition and just talk a little bit about your own writing life. So when you look back over your own writing life, what did your self-doubt look like for you initially, and how has it changed, or has it?
I have been exploring that a lot lately because I realized I had to come to terms more specifically with my own lived doubt and really be in touch with that. And I dredged up a whole bunch of memories, and then I saw the through line, and I was like, oh, I see that now. I get it. I see what's been going on here. So I have this incredibly indelible memory that is decades old. I was about 23, and I was visiting a friend from college who had a roommate who was enrolled in film school. This was out in Hollywood. And I'd never seen something like a screenplay or anything like that. And this guy, I got to chatting with my friend's roommate, and he let me try my hand at working on a scene. This is back in the day when there was only this thing called a typewriter. That's how old I am. So that's how long ago this was. So he had the scene rolled in this typewriter, and he let me sit down, and he told me where the scene was going, whatever. And I sat down, and for the first time in my life, I'm like writing dialogue for a purpose in a scene to make something happen. And something in me physically went nuts. I was flooded with adrenaline. I mean, shaking with adrenaline. I was just overwhelmed with this physical sensation of adrenaline, endorphins. I don't know what the chemicals were, but something was happening. And I couldn't read that moment in my life the way I read it now. That moment was telling me, you need to do this. This is something you need to be doing. Your entire physical body is telling you need to be doing this. And I came away from that, and the guy didn't, tell me that I'd written this scene of genius or anything. And so immediately I'm like, oh, well, okay, I don't know what this was, but this is nothing. I can't do this, whatever this is, I can't do this. So I go back home and I try to forget it. And I'm telling you this literally over 40 years later, and I never forgot it. That was one. I won't bore you with several more examples. That was one of several examples where my heart, my soul was telling me who I probably really was and needed to be. And I denied it and denied it and denied it. And I went in other directions and I wouldn't listen. And honestly, probably not till I was in my 50s and I started writing plays and I let floodgates open. Took me a really long time because the tape in my head was, this isn't for you. This is for those really cool, interesting, creative, daring people out there. That's not you. You just have to have a job and pay your rent. And I feel terrible for that younger version of me for not being able to make that connection. And it's a very real moment for me. And it wasn't the only one. I had to live that story over many times.
I get it. I really, really, really get it.
I literally have tears in my eyes. I can't tell this without having tears in my eyes.
Yeah. I have a similar kind of experience, actually. I remember the moment that, in retrospect, I remember the moment where my creativity was like stepped on hard. And then I remember several moments where, and I won't bore you with them either, the details of those, but just several moments where I made a decision and I knew I was consciously denying myself what was right for me because I didn't think I was good enough for it.
Mm-hmm.
And those are, just a simple, take a creative writing class versus taking the economics class. This and that.
I totally get it. Mm-hmm.
And I did that for years, and I wound up with degrees like in economics and in medicine. And I did so many I should do's.
Yep.
I should do this. I should be this. And by being and doing these things, I then become acceptable. And that's what I needed for myself. And, the result was that my insides were a mess. And eventually those insides, it also became a mess on the outside. And then I had to go fix the whole boat.
Stacey, this so resonates because even though I went on to jobs that had a writing component to them, like in other words, I couldn't have done economics or medicine, it resonates so deeply because it's at our root is just self-denial of massive proportions, and it's exacerbated by living in a culture that does not want us to go down that other path that doesn't perhaps pay well, the path that doesn't come with title, prestige, promotions, recognizable markers of success, the path that doesn't, your parents go, oh, I'm so proud of you for, graduating from, getting your MBA. Like the culture doesn't help us. And so we're dying on the inside. And that happened to me as well. I think I was probably close to an official nervous breakdown. You can interpret that any way you want. I think I was very close. And I just was like, if I don't change, I'm afraid of what's going to happen. Like I have to, and, if we can save ourselves, we do, and
I call that a moment of desperation, of true desperation.
Desperation.
Where I finally became willing to listen to what was going on inside of me. And then I had to go get help to like sort all that shit out. But eventually I came to the place where I believe that my voice is unique and creative and so is yours. And so is the next and the others and anybody else. And we, and it's important to share our stories because that's how we create empathy and compassion and, how we spread hope in the world is through hearing other people's stories. And if we have no hope, we have nothing. To me, that's so. That went deep. Thank you. And I just
did.
thank you for your vulnerability and your honesty and your compassion. And even though, right? Even though we went through shit, right? You went through shit. I went through shit. Look at the
Mhm.
result when you're willing to, you know, I don't know, like when you're willing to walk through it, we get beautiful books like what you've put in the world and podcasts like this that are willing to share the shitty side of things and not just
Absolutely.
talk about the success, but like the rocky road that comes with being empowered. So, okay, so we're going to dive back into the last wrap-up question. Okay, so what would you say have been some of the most helpful resources for you to persevere with your writing when things get hard?
Resources to persevere with my writing when things get hard. You know, here's if we haven't done enough confessing, I'm going to come out with another really big one. Resources to me conjures up the 10,000 books about writing and craft and this and that. Don't read any of them. And I don't because I don't want to fill my head. I don't have room to rent out to more voices. I got enough voices in there. They talk to me at night. They don't let me fall asleep. So I got a lot going on in there. So for me, resources really comes down to how I deploy my inner resources. When I'm writing, first of all, I take ideas and inspiration from the real world all the time, from news, from an experience in a room with people, from a what if question that pops up to me, from reading something else that just sets a spark off in me about, wow, this gets me thinking about X. And so those are resources that I really dive into and run with. But for me, it's really about the inner resources. It's what do I really, really, really want to say? How do I want to say it? How is it making me feel? Is this bringing me joy to work on this? Do I really want to do this, or am I responding to something completely outside of myself that's, you know, artificially driving me forward? So I just try and check in with my own gut and make sure that I'm writing from the inside out and not from the outside in. And that's probably not an answer to your question, but it's the way I answer it.
I love that answer. I love that answer. So that say that again. I'm writing from the inside out.
Inside out, not from the outside in.
I really love that. And that's something that I'll carry with me. And, yeah, wow. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for your time and your generosity of spirit and your expertise. All right. Amy, where can listeners find you and your fabulous book, Wrangling the Doubt Monster?
Wrangling the Doubt Monster is available really wherever books are sold or can be ordered. And I love when folks come to my website, amywrites.live, AMYWRITES.live. Check me out, check out my other books, check out my book coaching, and have a fun moment there. And that's pretty much the best place to go.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. And I can't wait for the rest of the writing world to enjoy your book as much as I have.
Thank you, Stacey. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Write It Scared podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please make sure to hit the follow button so you never miss an episode. And please leave a review. Reviews help other writers like you find the voices and messages they need to hear to continue to write their stories. Let's lift each other up. Remember, you can be scared and still be unstoppable. I'll see you next week.